This attack continues on with the Kioptrix series, and it focuses on trying to discover something running as root so you can take advantage of that. So that's what we're going to do today. As always, you really do need to understand your environment. It doesn't matter quite so much this time, but in the past, we have enabled, I hate this. In the past, we have enabled Samba to run better in our environment, and that's going to help today. Because one of the things we are going to exploit is the list of users on this machine that use Samba. And we're going to try and take that information and glean extra information from it. So one of the ways around that is to install a legacy version that supports Samba, and we've seen that, and it works. And there used to be content, and I'm not sure if it's still there, I think I've cleaned it up for the most part, where I walk students through the process of setting up something called hot wax, where you would install legacy drivers for Samba as well. Not just configure legacy support, but actually install the legacy drivers. So if you're ever in a position where you really need Samba early versions to work properly, sometimes you may actually have to go in and install all that legacy code. And there's something available called hot wax that does make that possible. Let's just file that away. But we're not going to need that for our activities today. So, as always, first things first, let's fire up Kali. And once we've done that, we can also import an appliance. The link in D drive should be working. We're looking at K4 today. And there really shouldn't be any issues with this import. Everything should work properly for us. But regardless, we always do a sanity check on our network settings. And we ensure that we have no errors listed here. So that's going to be okay, and we can fire that one up as well. And as always, one thing we want to do is we want to watch it boot up and see if we can get any hints or see any problems as our target machine fires up. MySQL database, that's interesting. And that's it. Ligote security server. Okay, interesting. No real new anything here, so okay. Didn't get anything there, but that's alright. We didn't see any problems either. So we're going to try logging in. We're not going to try logging. We're going to log in to our Kali. What is wrong with my desktop today? Good Lord. All right. So we're going to fire up Kali. And as always, I'm just going to keep track of what I'm doing by bringing up a notepad type tool. So, not that it is as important today as it has been in the past, but if it builds up a tendency on your part to always do this, then I'm okay with it. So I'm going to try and understand my environment, so I know I'm Kali, so let's see what else we see on our network. With the Nmap scan. Are there any questions?
No, I just had to do my Ethernet adapter again, so I just did that. Things
Alright.
working again.
Cool. If you have any questions, let me know. So we know that Kali is 227. We know that's Kali. We don't have to worry about that. We know 56.1 is our host environment. That leaves us with 239 as an unknown IP. Let us target that in our attack today. And while you should always do this, this is going to be one of those rare events where doing that really isn't going to give us that much more information. Certainly not going to change our behavior. Because as I mentioned before, anytime you see indications of Samba, given how older versions of Samba were so had so many vulnerabilities associated with them, we're going to focus on that. And again here we get some indications that they are probably older versions of Samba, so we're definitely going to focus on there. We've got a web server running and OpenSSH. So we're going to actually take a look at all of these services in our attack today. But as always, we've found Samba. Looks a little older. We're going to start focusing on that. So first things first, I want to verify that my environment is set up the way we discussed earlier. And I've mentioned, and if you downloaded the notes before today, maybe grab them again because I've updated the notes with this one sentence. Samba, smb.conf. You want to verify. He could have actually, I should have used the less command rather than the cat, but that's okay. Under your global settings, for our attacks, we want to ensure that we have enabled legacy support. And it is done with that line right here. Client min protocol is equal to NT1. Okay? We've seen this before. We've done this in a previous attack. You always want to ensure that you have that configuration. We do. So cue to quit.
So I just one question. Where is that link? I don't see it in the document.
It's not a link. If you if you take a look at the page 2, at the first big paragraph near the top, right underneath the enum for Linux statement, I talked about it. But you know what? Let's do this. etc samba, no, less etc samba smb.conf, I believe is the command I used. When you run that command, you're looking for the following. Client, I better not because I'm going to screw it up. Client min protocol is equal to NT1, and I'm not sure if it is case sensitive. I've always typed it in that syntax, in that case, but that's what you're looking for, and it should be somewhere in the
Sorry,
global.
I can't see where you're typing. I can see your screen, but I can't see where you're typing.
Check out the chat log for this in Teams, but I can also add it here.
Sorry, I just was missing that. All right.
Not a problem. Not a problem. That's why I'm here. Alrighty, so that's what we're trying to do, and to be honest, you will know very quickly if that is in place. Okay. The next thing I want to do is my enum for Linux. I want to target my target IP It's not 134. For me, it's going to be 239, just like that. And the fact that it is running pretty quickly is a good indicator. One thing that's always challenging for students in this is that the way that it's run is kind of a bit of a, it's variable. It's a bit RNG when we're trying to analyze the results. So I can't say scroll up halfway, you will see the results. The results can be anywhere. Consequently, you really need to look through your results set to make sure that you find what you're looking for. And this is the important bit here. When Samba is running in older versions, and when the Samba client that we are using, this is the server, when the server is running on legacy versions, legacy protocols, and when our client is configured properly to interact with those legacy versions of Samba, you sometimes will see a list of valid users that are using Samba that are actually real Unix accounts. We've said this before. When it comes to cracking accounts on a system, there's two parts, the username and the password. By and far, the easy part is the username, but it's not the only part. As we saw when we were doing our Medusa attacks, if you have a username and you have a dictionary of passwords, you may be able to discover the password once you've had the username information. I've said this time and time again. The email address for a user should not be the user's ID on a network. At the college, my credentials for getting onto the college's Active Directory is tied to my username SJ, which is also my email address at the college, which is not ideal. When you take a look at more secure environments, the email address is different than the login ID for an individual on that domain, on that Active Directory, or whatever they're using for authentication. So you want to protect the username as much as possible, which is why these legacy Sambas, even though we don't get the password, these legacy Samba analyses give us really, really, really good information. We've got 3 users here. Lone Ferret, which should start looking familiar to you, John and Robert. So we found some valid users discovered. Perfect. We've discovered that. Let's see what else we can find. I'm starting to have multiple tabs. Let's start labeling our tabs. And I found some good information for my Samba stuff. Now let's take a look at doing some Apache work. So I'm going to open up another tab again, and I am going to do my derb and Nikto analysis. Again, it's not 251, it is 239er. And we'll see what it comes up with. Okay, so there's an index.php page. Well, let's take a look at that. There's a directory called John. There's a user called John. So we have a directory called John and we have a user called John. That's interesting. We've got an index.php, so we can assume PHP is running. I wonder what else is running. So we're going to open that link. Looks like there's a login page. Well, that's interesting. Now I'd probably check out the LIGO security login thing, but I don't think I'm going to find anything other than probably the solutions to today's activity, which of course doesn't really help us from an academic point of view, but of course you want to look into these things. Okay, so we found a simple login. The first thing we want to do is, or 1 is equal to 1, and try a simple wrong username or password. Let's try again. Let's try doing John as a username, and we'll try entering our SQL injection as the password. Tick or 1 is equal to 1, and we're going to try it. All right, it was PHP. We're going to assume LAMP stack. We're going to assume with PHP they're doing the MySQL. So you can try typing it in, but as you can see, it has the password mask on it. So I just make sure I type it properly, copy and paste, and we are in. And not only are we in, it shows us that the password is probably stored in plain text somewhere in the database, which isn't good. Now, this is possible that it's not a database. It's possible it's a simple text file that has this information in it. I really don't know. The fact that I was able to do SQL injection, though, tells me that we're probably using some kind of an SQL system. The fact that the hash worked tells me it's probably MySQL. So, good. Any questions? Alrighty, let's move on. So, we found a username. There is a password that says my name is John. We know users are lazy. We know users sometimes reuse their credentials. Let's try that. Now, we can also try with we can also try with Lone Ferret, right? We can try oh shoot. We can also try Lone Ferret and our password and see if that works. Oops, something went wrong with your members page. All right, so Lone Ferret doesn't look like they're in the system. Let's try Robert. Oh, John. Okay, so that's weird. Interesting. Interesting. So let's try logging out of both of these. And let's try logging in again as Robert with our SQL injection, which is still in my clipboard. And we've got a password that actually looks like it might be hashed. Okay? And the reason why I say that, it doesn't look like it's salted, all right? But it does look like it's hashed because in some of the more basic hashings, you will have it what's called not buffering, but padding. They will sometimes pad a specific number of characters with an equal sign. That's an indicator that you've got some kind of a hashing going on for Robert's password. All right. So interesting that Robert's password is probably hashed. I don't know if I can do anything with Robert's credentials, but I know for sure that I can do something with John's credentials because that looks like a plain text password to me. Now, is it possible Roberts is a plain text hash? Of course it is. But I've got this. I'm going to start with that. And I'm going to again remember how lazy people can be with their passwords. And if nothing else, at the end of all these pen test attacks, I hope, gentlemen, that you realize how dangerous it is for you to be lazy with passwords and to reuse passwords. It is dangerous. All right. So that was my first web scan. Let's take a look if we see anything interesting with Nikto as well. See if we get anything extra with the Nikto scan. We'll call that web enumeration. We get again indications of PHP installed. That's nice, but we kind of discovered that ourselves. But again, we run both just to see if one gives us something that the other may have missed. I don't really see anything. I don't really see any indications of the John directory either. One more reason why we try to run both. And if you get into industry, there are other ones. Look at those as well. Take a look at SQL Map. It's a great web enumeration tool, but it's just too powerful. It's too script kiddie for this class, and there's nothing wrong with script kiddie tactics other than you lose the academic value of something a little bit more difficult to use, which is at the end of the day my goal. All right, so we found some interesting stuff. We have realized interesting information with the SMB protocol. We've discovered some vulnerabilities around the web application. We've discovered a username password combination, and we see open SSH. So we know that they're probably accepting SSH connections. Let's try and create a connection using SSH for the credentials that we have discovered that we think are plain text. So we're going to SSH John at our target IP 192. Sorry, let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. 192.168.56.239. That looks right. So when you're trying to do an SSH session as somebody other than the username you're logged in as, you specify that username at the beginning. So in this case we want to be John, so it's John at the target, the server you want to connect to. In this case an IP address. It will ask you if you want to download that key to your local collection of keys. You actually have to type out yes. So it has added it. It's warning, but that's fine. And we want John's password, and we know what it is. Now you can try copying and pasting, but you don't get the echo back. So MYNAMEISJOHN. My name is John. Perfect. And I am in. So I've created a remote shell. Who am I? Ooh, wait, what? What do you mean who am I? It doesn't work. Who am I? I mistyped that. PWD, unknown commands. And this is again where we have to stop and read what's going on here. Welcome to the LiGoat security system. We are watching. Really unlikely, but who cares? We're doing a security audit. Welcome LiGoat employee. LiGoat shell is placed so you don't screw up. This is starting to sound an awful lot like the K3 activity, isn't it? Type in question or help to get a list of allowed commands. Well, isn't that just a kick in the nether regions? So apparently these 8 commands are the only commands we're allowed to use in this environment, making it more difficult for us to compromise. Again, another example of security through obscurity, which I have no problem with, as long as it is one layer in an overall security protocol, all right? Relying exclusively on security through obscurity is not a good idea. Adding it is fine, but only as a layer, and a pretty thin layer in the overall stack of security measures. So, holy crap, I haven't even looked at my notes. One sec. Okay, good. No, I haven't missed anything. This is a pretty straightforward activity, this one. So, I will need something though, because I don't think I'm going to remember how to do that. Okay, right now I'm about halfway down page 4. Okay? So, one of the commands that they do allow is the echo command, and we've seen in the past a way of spawning our own shells. I don't know if I still have that. Try and find that command for us again. There it is. I pointed this content out to you a while ago, and I'm going to add it to the chat log. This was a collection of quick ways to spawn shells when you're trying to compromise the system. I have been using this Python one quite a bit, and I really like it, but right away the next one, you can actually echo something and spawn your own shell by saying os.system and then whatever shell you want to use. We're going to use bin bash. So you can spawn your own shell with the echo command. And surprisingly, echo is one of the commands we are allowed to execute in this environment. So let's see if we can do that. We're going to echo os.system, and we are going to choose the shell to spawn. I'm going to try bin bash and see what happens. My prompt changes. That's promising. My whoami command works. Awesome. So their security through obscurity helped, but not a lot. Okay, I was able to circumvent it because they allow the echo command. Because I can use the echo command to spawn a shell, I was able to circumvent this LIGO shell that they have in place to try and limit people's behaviors. Any questions on that? Still not root. Alright, still want to try and elevate myself to root. But right now, I found a couple of very serious vulnerabilities with this website. I would, of course, report those and let them know. Before we go any further, there's a couple of different tactics that you want to consider now. If you can somehow take advantage of a server process running as root, any compromises that you can cause by that will run as root, hopefully. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. We're going to see if there's any server processes that happen to be running as the root ID. Another one we'll see next week. I can't remember when. Another one is when we're looking for systems that have or commands that have the SUID bit set. It's another common tactic for hackers. Is something running as root when it needs to, and can I spawn a shell from that thing that's running as root when it needs to? The best example is the password command, PASSWD. We all, from time to time, need to be able to change our passwords. So we type in the PASSWD command. And if we supply the correct password that it is now and a new password that we want to change, it will update the shadow file. But think about that. You as a regular user can write to the shadow file where you normally do not have permissions to look at the contents of the shadow file. How is that even possible? And that's what's called the SUID bit. It's a special property that is set on certain commands that operate as root when necessary. As a common tactic to try and find those and see if there aren't some vulnerabilities you can leverage there. We'll look at that in a future class, but what we're going to look at today is another tactic of looking for processes that run as root. And that's a simple command. It is the PS command. I usually use EAF. It gives me as much information as possible. And I want to take a look at everything that might be running as root. When you do the PS command, it says who it is running as. And there's a lot of stuff running as a lot of different users. And I'm really only interested in the ones that the UID is root. So what I do is I do the ps-eaf command, and then I redirect the results to the grep command, which searches for a string. The string, of course, we were looking for is the root command. And when we do that, I mean the grep root becomes one of the things that it finds with the root string in it. But everything else is processes running on this machine as root. That's handy, especially when you realize that one of those processes is the MySQL database server software, which is, of course, frightening. All right, this is a process that's kind of world-facing and a little worrisome that this is running as root. There's also something else related to MySQL that's running as root as well, related to the same process, which is MySQL daemon safe, which is interesting. So there's all of this stuff. There's all of this stuff running related to MySQL running as root. So I really want to take a look at that. Now, fortunately, I have a real shell going here. I don't have a crippled shell, and I don't have a hacked shell like you spawn from a remote environment. This is a real connected shell. Perfect. Let's take a look at it. So I need to log in into this MySQL. I'm going to try logging into MySQL. All right, that's cool, but I have to log in with user credentials. That doesn't help me. Wait a minute. There's an application running here. Let's take a look and see if we can't find some database credentials. If you have a shell and you have a web application connecting to a database, you have a shell and you have a database driven website, you can go through the file system and find the credentials for that application. It's typically in var www, and then there's going to be a subdirectory of something. All right, it's either going to be HTML or it's going to be here. That's typically where they are. You can also take a look at the etc directory, and you will see some other sites configured here as well. Sites available and sites enabled may point at document roots that are outside of the var www directory. Okay, sometimes these sites are in other places. They'll be in their own subdirectory in the var directory. But that's not going to be something we need to worry about today. We're going to take a look at var www and do an ls-al again, and we will see we're not seeing a config file anywhere. There's no config file here. There is the check login. All right, that looks like something that might hit a database. So let's see what that one says. And when we take a look at the contents of the check login page, we find our connection information hard-coded into the file rather than using a require statement to include a config file somewhere. But the important thing is it's localhost root without a password. So it's even worse. All right, the database is members, the table is members, but the root, the MySQL process that runs as the Unix system root, we can now log into it with the database root credentials, and it has no password. So this is just fraught for exploitation. All right, so let's take a look at where we are. We found some stuff. Our enum for Linux found us a list of users. One of those users was John. Kind of matches what we found when we did our web enumeration, some directory structure called John. Given those, we were able to do a basic SQL injection with a username of John and a password with our standard MySQL-based SQL injection. Once we did that, we found out that John's password is "my name is John." Given that people can sometimes be lazy, we tried logging into SSH with that, and we got a shell. There is a weak shell that's created by default, but by using the echo command, we got around that. And because we got around it, we can basically run any command that's available on that system. We found, using the ps command, that MySQL is running as root. When we found some of the credentials, we also found that they are root. So now we can start MySQL as root, because sometimes there is a module in MySQL that will let you do system calls. And it seems weird until you think about why it might be in place. Any DBMS, I shouldn't speak in absolutes, most DBMSs have the ability to have database triggers. You all know what a database trigger is. When a record is created or something happens, make this database event occur. One of them may be that, hey, if something happens, let's send an email to someone. And unless the DBMS has the ability to spawn emails, which a lot of them do now, but they didn't for a long time, unless the DBMS has that built into it, you want to be able to spawn a send email server process. And that's why some of these used to have the ability to spawn system calls. All right? And that's what we're going to try and see if this one's configured to do. Spoiler alert, it is. Okay, so we're going to try the MySQL again as root and see if it'll let me in without a password. Perfect. All right. Now, this is where things get a little bit. Before I do that, I forgot to do one. Yeah, you see, this is why I really should follow my notes. All right, because if I can, before I can do that, yeah, I missed something. This is why I really should be going through my notes. I apologize about this, guys. I'm going to quit out of this. All right. One of the things I should have tried earlier was the sudo command su dash. Sudo wants John's password, so sudo's installed. That's always should be one of the first things you should try, and I forgot about that. I know John's password is my name is John. John is not in the sudoers file, all right? So there's a couple of ways that people can be in the sudo system, all right? They can be added individually as a user, or they can be part of a group, and then you can give permissions to the group in the sudoers file. Unfortunately, we can't see the sudoers file. If I take a look at the sudoers file, it says no, you do not have permissions to look at the sudoers file, which is kind of to be expected, because if I can see what's going on in there, I can mess around and try and get access to the system. Knowing that sometimes there are groups, I'm going to take a look at the group file. And right away I start seeing John's group, Robert's group, an admin group that has Lone Ferret in it. Lone Ferret seems to be someone who has a lot of involvement in a lot of things. Lone Ferret is starting to look a little bit like an admin again on this environment. And surprisingly, Lone Ferret is in a group called admin. All right. So we can try doing group add dash. It's not group add. It's user mod dash a to group admin John. See if nope, no, I can't do that. So sudo user mod dash a dash g admin John. So I'm trying to modify. Oh. John is not in the sudoers file, so that didn't work. Of course it didn't work because I'm not in there, and that's what I'm trying to do. All right, so the user mod is saying add to the group admin and add John to that admin. So I'm trying to get John into the admin group. Now, remembering what I discovered earlier, that MySQL is running as root, and I have root access into it, and knowing that sometimes MySQL has a module or a library installed, a function called sysexecute. Let's see if we can't take advantage of that. Now that we have a goal for that, which I should have done before, and I apologize. Now that we have a goal for that, let's spawn that up. So we're going to try the MySQL again as root. And the command is select sysexec. It's a function, and with this function, we supply a system command. And again, you know, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but generally this was designed so that you can go and spawn communication things like send an email or something like that, or write to a log that, you know, you go through and send messages based on that log. So we're going to open up and we're going to actually execute that user mod command. Dash A dash G, or if you want, you can do AG like that. I believe that will work as well, because it just switches at this point. Now that you've seen how the command runs, basically, don't forget the semicolon because it is an SQL statement. You can do dash A add to group admin, but because there's switches and it's Unix, you can do AG right together as one batch of switches. So, looks good. I don't know. I didn't throw any errors. let's try and see if we can now do something with sudo. Password for John, it's not password, it is my name is John, is John's password. My prompt is changed. I am as root. And again, I can see the shadow file. And if I can see the shadow file, I am probably really in as root at that point. Any questions? Okay. Again, apologies for breaking the proper flow. But before I can even look at this MySQL, the first things you should do is try and use the sudo command. All right? Sudo is configured a couple of different ways. See, right away I'm trying to find a root process. Before you even do that, in general, I want you to look for sudo. Clearly, sudo is in place. We kind of see it by asking us for a password and then saying, John is not in this sudoers file. I mean, you don't get this without sudo being installed and in place and configured. So we're going to try and take a look at the sudoers file just in case there's weak security. It didn't work. But we know sometimes that sudoers is configured with group access, and I'll show you that in a sec. And we do see an admin group. An admin group is often used, not always. Again, security through obscurity would probably use a different group name. But when you see an admin group and you know sudoers is configured, or sudo is configured, you want to see if you can add whatever account you want to that group. Okay? And when I did that, it didn't work because I don't have permissions. But again, knowing that MySQL is installed, running as root, and knowing that I have the credentials for the database root account on that system, I'm going to try and see if the system execute function is enabled and that module is installed in MySQL. All right, I'm just going to try it. If it is, it will execute a system call. If the server is running as root, that system call will execute as root, adding me to the admin group. So now I can take a look at the etc sudoers file, and we see a group admin, which is exactly what we thought we were going to see. Any questions?
I think that's pretty straightforward.
It is pretty straightforward. Any questions? There is a competency based on this. I'm going to ask you why you're doing stuff in this competency because it is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to say, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? And the spoilers, the big one is going to be, why did you do that? Okay, what made you do that? So be prepared to explain what these different steps do when you do this competency. Any questions? Okay, that's it for me for today. You have the rest of today to work on this, and there is, of course, a competency for it. And I do, of course, want to see a report.